This week on World 360, we bring you New Delhi's biggest diplomatic triumphs from the G20 summit. What stands out is how India's presidency defied predictions to crack the New Delhi leaders' declaration. In a deepening of ties between two anti-West nations, Russia and North Korea have met at a rare summit. Hello and a very warm welcome to World 360. I'm Shashi Tharoor. Let's get started with the headlines first. US assures action after India calls for probe into video showing Seattle police officer laughing at a student's death. Jahnavi Kandula was killed on 23rd January this year after being struck by a police vehicle driven by Officer Kevin Day. US President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has been indicted by Special Counsel David Weiss in connection with a gun he purchased in 2018. The first time in US history, the Justice Department has charged the child of a sitting president. US House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has instructed lawmakers to open a formal impeachment inquiry into US President Joe Biden, a step that isn't required to start the impeachment process but could ramp up the House GOP's investigations into Biden's family. In a rare summit on Wednesday, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed military matters, the war in Ukraine, and possible Russian help for the secretive state's satellite program. Libya's flood-stricken city of Derna closed off as searchers look for 10,100 persons still missing after flood deaths rise to 11,300. And NASA's UFO report finds no evidence of extraterrestrial origin for unidentified anomalous phenomena sightings. This as the Mexican Congress has shown supposed bodies of non-human alien corpses at UFO hearing. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin met for a rare summit this week on Wednesday at which they discussed military matters, the war in Ukraine, and even possible Russian help for the secretive state's satellite program. Sidestepping Western suspicions of a rumored arms deal between the two countries, Vladimir Putin told reporters the Cosmodrome was chosen because Kim Jong-un shows great interest in rocket engineering. And at this rare summit, both leaders stressed their nation's historic friendship, with Kim Jong-un calling the Russian friendship the number one priority of foreign policy for North Korea. Putin also said there were possibilities for military cooperation between the two countries, while emphasizing that Russia would comply with its international obligations. Let's also take you through some of the highlights of the Putin-Kim meeting. First, these talks happened since April of 2019. It's very important to note, considering it's been more than 4 years since Putin and Kim met last. This was an opportunity for two isolated nations to advance their military operation, bolstering further military cooperation, which was also discussed. And North Korea expressed its support to Russia versus the entire West, and a West that is led by the United States. Both nations have seen this as an opportunity to expand their ties, and experts are now fearing that there's a scenario of a Cold War kind of framework on the Korean peninsula, and Pyongyang's massive provision of shells for Moscow may have also been discussed, because remember, Moscow is right now in need for this ammunition because it's fighting a war in Ukraine, and North Korea hopes to provide this ammunition to Moscow, which may have also been discussed. And North Korea is now desperate to secure military satellite technology from Russia in return. However, any arms deal between Pyongyang and Moscow constitutes a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and that bans armed transactions with the North, which is perhaps there's been no official confirmation from Russia about this arms deal. Let's also listen in to what the Russian president and North Korea's chairperson Kim Jong-un had to say.
Нам, конечно, нужно поговорить по вопросам экономического взаимодействия, по вопросам гуманитарного характера, по ситуации в регионе. Вопросов у нас много. Я хочу сказать, что я очень рад вас видеть. Благодарю за то, что вы приняли приглашение и приехали в Россию.
러시아가 지금 아주 그런 패거리 세력에 맞서서 자기 주권적 권리와 또 안전 이익과 이걸 수호하기 위해서 정의 위협을 벌이고 있는데, 우리는 시정일관 러시아 정부 그 당시께서 취하시는 모든 조치에 전적인 무조건적인 지지를 표명해 왔고 앞으로도 언제나 반전 자주 전선에서 언제나 러시아와 함께 있을 것임을 다시 이 기회를 빌어서 확언하는 바입니다.
Now, the world has been horrified by shocking footage of a Seattle police officer belittling the killing of an Indian woman by another cop. In this video, Daniel Odderer, who is captured on body camera while discussing the fatal collision, can be heard saying, yeah, just write a check. $11,000. She was 26 anyway. She had limited value. If this is not xenophobia, then what is? Janvi Kandula was killed on 23rd of January this year after being struck by a police vehicle driven by Officer Kevin Dave. Dave was driving at 74 miles per hour on the way to an overdose call. And according to reports, Daniel Odderer, who is the vice president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild as well as a drug recognition expert, was assigned to evaluate whether Officer Kevin Dave was impaired. It was at this point that Odderer left his body-worn camera on as he called the Guild president Mike Solan to report this matter. Now, nearly 8 months on, this footage was released by the police department on Monday in Seattle. Odderer could be seen laughing and suggesting that Kandula's life had limited value and the city should just write a check. Listen in to Odderer's xenophobic comments belittling Kandula's deeply tragic death.
She had limited value, but she is dead. No, it's a regular person. Yeah. Yeah, just write a check. Just, yeah, $11,000. She was 26 anyway. She had limited value. But she is dead.
Now, it should be noted that this shockingly racist episode has appalled India and the United States. Indian-American Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy and Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal have strongly condemned this incident. Most importantly, Indian Ambassador to the United States, Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, has sought prompt action into this entire matter. Soon after the Biden administration took cognizance of the issue, it has now assured the Indian government of a quick investigation into the entire case. The world has lauded India's G20 presidency, and in the next few minutes, we at CNN News 18 will bring you exclusive inputs from global newsmakers. But a massive shot in the arm during India's G20 presidency has been the addition of the African Union to the mega grouping. The African Union became a permanent member of G20 during the Delhi Summit of World Leaders and will have the same status as the 27-member European Union. And in a big endorsement of India's rising global stature, African Union chairperson Azalia Somani observed that India is now a superpower ahead of China. Highlighting the good relationship between New Delhi and Addis Ababa, he expressed optimism regarding future ties between them. Concerns have also been raised about the investment scope for India and the West in the African Union, considering China and Russia have already made inroads. Here's what the African Union president has to say.
Be assured that Africa has 66% of arable land, a population of 1.31 billion, 0.300, and very soon it will reach 2 billion inhabitants. Africa has enough material resources for all countries and all continents who would like to invest in the continent. Africa has human and natural resources, a lot of potentiality, so nobody has the monopoly in Africa. All the countries and all the continents who would like to get involved in Africa, they have their room to. Europe is also in Africa, so the most important thing is to sit together, work together, and see who can do what for the benefit of.
Donc, pour compléter à votre question, effectivement, le G20, c'est quand même une puissance composée de pays très puissants. Vous en avez cité certains-uns, mais les autres, comme l'Inde, comme le Brésil, tous ceux qui veulent venir en Afrique, je vous dis qu'il y a de la place. D'ailleurs, les ressources dont on dispose par rapport à l'effort qu'on doit faire pour lutter contre le dérèglement climatique, effectivement, ils sont là. Mais effectivement, c'est à eux de venir à investir en Afrique. En ce temps-là, comme il y a un marché africain, on va commencer par consommer. Mais aussi, comme on ne peut pas tout consommer, c'est en ce temps-là qu'on va importer. Mais on va importer des produits finis au lieu d'importer des produits bruts. En ce temps-là, en investissant en Afrique, on crée de l'emploi, on forme les jeunes et on les protège d'être dans les mains de la passe pour faire les extrémistes de toutes sortes.
So G20 is composed of superpower. India, Brazil, and other countries can come to Africa. There is enough room for everybody. We have to work together to fight climate change. So we have to produce in Africa in order to export to the world. So this will help create jobs. We have also to train the youth so that they cannot be taken away by extremist acts.
What's important is that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had advocated full membership for the African Union in G20, a proposal that had received wide support from the key global players. Listen in to what President Assoumani has to say about Prime Minister Modi's leadership in a CNN News 18 exclusive. President, when we talk about inclusivity being one of the themes of G20 this year, how inclusive was the New Delhi leaders' declaration, according to you, apart from the grand feat of the inclusion of African Union?
De ce côté-là, Madame, rassurez-vous, on a été très satisfait de la tenue de ce sommet, et puis les travaux, comment se sont passés, et la déclaration qui a eu l'unanimité. Maintenant, c'est la mise en œuvre de la déclaration. C'est là où on doit s'atteler à ce qu'on a dit ici, dans la déclaration, que ça puisse se concrétiser en fait, pour que ça soit dans le sens, effectivement, de nos ambitions, des ODD, des ambitions de développement socio-économique du monde.
Now the issue is to focus on the implementation so that we can see how together we can work out and implement the declaration.
How significant has been the role of Prime Minister Modi, and what were your thoughts when he invited you to the high table? Could you describe that moment, please?
Enfin, Modi, il ne nous a pas surpris. Tout le monde connaît son leadership. Mais effectivement, comme ce sommet, c'est lui qui l'a abrité, il a pris toutes les mesures parce que ça passe dans de très bonnes conditions. En tout cas, toutes nos félicitations, tout le monde a félicité le président Modi par rapport à la réalisation, à la satisfaction de tout le monde dans le travail, et puis surtout aux résultats. Maintenant, on prie pour que le prochain sommet du CETIC qui va se passer au Brésil, ça se passe comme ça se passe ici en Inde.
Surprise for us. We received a very warm welcome. Everything went well, and we hope that the forthcoming summit that will take place in Brazil will have the same impact.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met on the sidelines of the G20. They discussed about the India-Canada relationship across various sectors. Prime Minister Narendra Modi sent out a stern message. This was over rising K propaganda in Canada. Prime Minister Modi expressed deep concerns over increasing anti-India propaganda in Canada. As per an MEA press release, in his meeting with Trudeau, Prime Minister Modi pointed out that Khalistani separatists have used Canadian soil to promote secessionism. Prime Minister Modi also told Trudeau that these Khalistani extremists have in recent times incited violence against Indian diplomats, damaged diplomatic premises, and threatened the Indian community in Canada and their places of worship. Justin Trudeau, while speaking to the media, answered queries on Khalistan extremism and said that Canada will always defend freedom of expression, and that is extremely important to them, even though his country is against hatred. Meanwhile, a pro-K referendum event was also held in a Gurudwara in Surrey in the backdrop of the two leaders holding this dialogue over the existing tensions. Let's also bring you the reactions.
They both came up over the years with Prime Minister Modi. We've had many conversations on both of those issues. Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us. At the same time as we're always there to prevent violence, to push back against hatred. I think on the issue of the community, it's important to remember that the actions of the few do not represent the entire community or Canada. The flip side of it, we also highlighted the importance of respecting the rule of law, and we did talk about foreign interference.
I do want to talk to you about one issue that cropped up again on the sidelines, one of the bilaterals that happened. The Prime Minister putting out a very strong statement to Canada on this issue of Khalistan business, the support and the safe haven that Canada or sections within Canada seem to have become. But the Canadian Prime Minister in his press conference sort of seemed to characterize this as a freedom of expression / foreign interference issue. How would you respond to that characterization?
No, I don't think there's anything for me to respond to. The Canadian Prime Minister and his system said what they had to say. I think our system said what it had to say. The particular issue, which is the space which has been given to the Khalistanis in Canada, I think is a worrisome issue. I think we have, this is one occasion, it's not a new conversation.
True.
This is part of an ongoing conversation. So I think that's really what there is to it. I would leave it at that.
Now, during the recently concluded G20 summit, India, the US, UAE, EU, France, Italy and Germany signed a memorandum of understanding to establish the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or the IMEC. This was on similar lines to China's BRI, and at a special event on the sidelines of the recently concluded G20 summit in New Delhi, a memorandum of understanding was signed to establish the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. Other than the two co-chairs of the event, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden, the signatories included leaders of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the EU, even Italy, France and Germany. Now, the project is part of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, or PGII, and it may also serve as a counter to China's economic influence in the Eurasian region. And the PGII will include railway projects which upon completion will provide a reliable and cost-effective cross-border ship-to-rail transit network to supplement existing maritime and road transport routes. That will also enable goods and services to transit between India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel and Europe. The objectives for IMEC include generating economic growth while incentivizing new investments in the region. It aims to connect the two continents, Asia and Europe, with commercial hubs and facilitate export of clean energy trade as well. The aim is also to strengthen food security and supply chains. The project will also help link energy grids and telecommunication lines through undersea cables to expand access to electricity and internet. In terms of objectives, both the mega transnational projects are similar. However, China's new Silk Route is larger in terms of scale. Announced in 2013, China has signed BRI cooperation documents with more than 150 countries and over 30 international organizations. This has galvanized nearly $1 trillion and created over 3,000 projects. Interestingly, some of the IMEC MOU signatories are also part of BRI, such as Italy, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But in a massive setback to Beijing, Italy has now decided to pull out of BRI. What are your views and how is Saudi Arabia weighing in on India's G20 presidency?
As you all know, India is a rising power to take its right place globally, and it's a high priority for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to have the best of relationship with India. The issue of geopolitical and economic is always at the center of attention. When we look at growth, we see that both countries are really achieving marvelous results in growing GDPs, even at difficult times.
Last but not the least, do you think that the issue of the war in Ukraine is sort of overshadowing the other dominant issues or burgeoning issues? Because let's not forget that the G20 as a mega grouping was created to address the financial crisis situation also all over the world. Is the war now sort of overshadowing? Because there's a lot of talk about how much space will the war find in the Delhi Declaration. What should be the approach of the major parties of G20?
I think the war in Ukraine is an issue, but is not overshadowing. And this we need to give credit to the wise leadership of Mr. Modi. It is an important issue.
And prior to the G20 summit, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had hoped India would be able to navigate the polarized geopolitical climate. And that's exactly what New Delhi managed with the leaders' declaration. Here's an exclusive conversation with Stéphane Dujarric, who's the UN spokesperson to the Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Let's listen in. I know Mr. Guterres extensively spoke about how he hopes India will be able to navigate the polarized geopolitical climate. How does he weigh in on the New Delhi leaders' declaration?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that there was a declaration is already a great victory. There's been a lot of chatter, as you know, that there would not be one. And I think the fact that there was a unanimous declaration is a reflection of the strong leadership of the G20 presidency and the willingness of all members of the G20 to compromise. And I think we need to have effective leadership. You need compromise. We can't solve any of the challenges we have in the world today without compromise.
Very rightly said. And that is why I now come to the theme of G20, which is about inclusivity, Vasudev Kutumbakam, that the world is one. When we talk about inclusivity, how does the UN look at the inclusion of the African Union now that India is also playing the role of bridging that gap between North and the global South? Also, not to forget the African continent.
Yes, in fact, I think India is a bridge builder, both politically and in a sense geographically. It is very important that the African Union was included in the G20. It sort of pumps up the voice of the global South, brings together all 193 member states in an effort to solve and to move forward on climate change, on global health, on all of these challenges that we're facing today.
Even though Russia has not been named, India managed to make useful points regarding the impact of conflict through the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. And Japan, being the chair of G7, has helped India to amplify concerns of Asia. Japan's Cabinet Secretary from the Prime Minister's office, Mr. Noriyuki Shikayata, joins me in an exclusive conversation. Let's listen in.
Of course, Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Modi have been working very closely together. Prime Minister Modi attended the G7 Hiroshima summit, and before G7 Hiroshima summit, Prime Minister Kishida came to Delhi in March this year. So we are collaborating very closely between G7 presidency and G20 presidency. And Prime Minister Kishida is looking forward to contributing to the success of G20 summit in India.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that you're talking about how closely the two countries have been working together. In fact, in news that's just coming in, there's in fact input coming in that India has managed to get the Delhi Declaration through. How closely has Japan worked on this Delhi Declaration with India to ensure that all parties are on the same page, even the ones who were expected to sort of pose a hurdle?
Mm-hmm. We commend the efforts of Indian government led by Prime Minister Modi to generate a positive outcome of G20 summit. And Japan has also been very proactive in supporting G20 presidency of India. So hopefully this would solidify our further cooperation toward the future.